Okay, we open up today again in the book of Ecclesiastes Chapter 4. We bow our heads in prayer. Gracious Father, we thank you for allowing us to be here. And as we open up the text today, we pray for guidance, we pray for direction, pray that your presence will be with us, manifest in our midst, bless us with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding as we discuss the Word of God today. In the name of your Son, Yeshua, amen. So we are picking up in Ecclesiastes Chapter 4. And it said, again, I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. And as I was saying, in some Bible translation, it will say, I return. And when he said he returned, he's talking about where he left off in chapter 3. In verse 16, he was saying that in the place he saw, in the place of judgment, wickedness took the place of judgment, and the place of righteousness, iniquity or lawlessness take over the place of lawlessness, of righteousness. So he's picking up here in chapter 4, and he said, again I looked and I saw all the oppression. Now, before we go further in the text, I think it will be important for us to maybe talk a little bit about the oppression. When he said oppression, and let us rest a little bit here on oppression. Now, if you remember, when we start this study in the book of Ecclesiastes, we said that Solomon was not the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes, in spite of the fact that most Bible interpreters, they all agree that King Solomon is the writer of the book. And, that is what most people or most interpreters will tell you. But when you look at the text and you look at the time in which the text was written, it's not Solomon that is the writer of the book. Solomon, it could be that they were writing about King Solomon. But there's another example here that we can use to know that Solomon was not the writer of the book. And I'm going to get into it. Now, when he said here, again, I looked and I saw all the oppression. You see that word oppression? Solomon could not be the writer of this book if this writer is calling out oppression, talking about oppression, talking about the oppression that was taking place, during his time. And when you look at the life of Solomon, King Solomon, at the end of his life, he was an oppressor. He was a person who was oppressing his people. Yes, he started out good. You remember when King David passed away, he asked the Lord for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and God grant that unto him. And also, God grant also, I think his riches and honor and stuff like that unto King Solomon. So yes, he started out okay. But King Solomon, he missed the mark, and he deviated a long way from where he started. And King Solomon, he was oppressing his people. And when you read in the Old Testament text, you will see King Solomon, he built, because he was very wasteful, he was a big spender, and he was a very extravagant kind of guy, and he was looking for fame, looking for power. And when you see the kind of wealth that he accumulate, and the amount of money he spent on building the temple, and the amount of money he spent on building his house, his palace, because Solomon, it took him 13 years to build his house. It took him longer to build his house than building the temple. So after he built the temple and built all the palace, took him so long, was so extravagant in what he was doing. He had so much gold chariots and so much horses. He was a wealthy man. And because of the fact that he was so heavily in debt, I would say, after a while, he became oppressive to his own people. He had heavy taxation to the people in the land of Israel. And when you read at the end of his life, after his son took over, because I think his son was Rehoboam, I think, and I think his servant. I always kind of get mixed up with these two names. The servant, I think, was Rehoboam, and I think Solomon's son, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Solomon's son was Rehoboam. And Solomon's servant was the one he was a very skillful man. He was in charge of, a lot of what Solomon was doing. And then I guess some kind of envy somewhere along the line get in there. And Solomon wanted was to kill him, so he ran away. But before he ran away, he was met by a prophet. And a prophet told him that he is going to take charge of a certain section of the kingdom of Israel. So Solomon was out to get this guy. So he ran away and he went to Egypt. Anytime somebody's on the run, Egypt is where they're running. He ran to Egypt. So when Solomon passed away, the people sent and called this guy because he was recognized by the people. Because there was more or less like dissatisfaction amongst the people, because they wasn't satisfied with the way how Solomon was treating them. So they sent back to Egypt and called this guy, Jeroboam. So when he came, Solomon's son, they having the coronation, ceremony for him. So this guy, Jeroboam, went with the people. The text did the amount of people that he had following him. And he went to Solomon's son and he told him, the people told him with this guy that came back from Egypt, to lessen the burden that Solomon was placing upon them. They said reduce the burden, talking about the taxation, the pressure, the oppression that Solomon was oppressing them with. Release it. And if you release it, we are going to serve you. We are going to serve you, and I guess they will serve him better than they were serving Solomon. And Solomon's son asked them for 3 days, I think. So let me take 3 days to think it over. So what he did, he went to the old counselors who was counseling King Solomon, and they told him to release the burden. The people want to work with you. Release the burden so they can work with you. And he didn't listen to them. What he did, he went to the guys that he grew up with, the younger guys that he grew up with, and he listened to them. And they said to tell the people, your father, the pressure that your father was putting on you, and I'm paraphrasing, it was just like your pinky finger. The weight of it was like your pinky finger. But the pressure that his son, is going to put on them is going to be like the tie. And the tie is a lot heavier than the pinky. So he didn't listen to what the people was asking for. Didn't listen to the older counselor by releasing the burden from what these people was facing. So what happened? The kingdom split. That is when you have the division of the kingdom. You have Judah and Benjamin. They were to was it to the north? Yes. South, sorry. They was to the south, and it's a while I haven't go over the text. You have 10 I think was to the north, and the 2 was to the south. So that is when you have the division of the kingdom. But what I'm saying is that this text that we are looking at here in Ecclesiastes Chapter 4, it could not be Solomon is a writer. Because if Solomon was a writer, he will not be calling out oppression and talking about people who was oppressing other people. Because King Solomon was an oppressor. At the end of his life, he deviated a lot from what God called him to do. He started out good, yes. And it seems as though when you look in the Bible, you see some of these guys, they start out good, and then at the end of their life, they just turn, and they turn away from what God really called him to do. Look at Gideon. Gideon was a mighty man of God. Remember, the Lord called him, and the Lord, sent him to deliver Israel, from the Midianites. He went and he did a good job. We all know about Gideon, 300 and all of that. when he came down to the end, Gideon, the wanted was to make him king over the nation of Israel and to have his sons, working alongside with him that, they can rule the country. And he said, but I don't want to be king over you. My sons are not going to be king over you. And all he said, I want you to give me, I guess when they raid and they capture these places, they used to take the bunting, they used to take like the gold ring and the earring and all of these things. Give me all of these things, the earring and the rings and all of these gold and jewelry that you have. And people said, well, yes, we'll give it to you. We'll gladly give it to you. They gave it to him, and what did he make? An ephod. He made a gold and whatever other precious things he put in it. And he made this ephod, and the people start worshipping that ephod. And not only that, after he finished that, he went out and he had, the text said, he had 70 sons. And I guess he had all this amount of women and concubine and stuff like that. So at the end of his life, things wasn't that, righteous with Gideon also. So I'm saying, when I look at the text, this I think is another proof here that we can use to see that Solomon could not be the writer of the text, because if he was writing it, and most Bible interpreters believe that it was King Solomon was writing. If he was writing, I don't think he would be talking about oppression. But what some of these interpreters are saying, they say, yes, it's Solomon. And what happened is that Solomon, he went into the hall of justice. This is what they say. He went into the hall of justice. And when he see the way how they handing out justice to the poor and to the people who don't have a voice, Solomon was so displeased, but he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't set it straight because, he didn't want to upset the foundation. He didn't want, because if he go in and set things straight, he might have just make a mess of things. So he had to leave it like that. This is what some of these interpreters are saying. But as I said, I don't think Solomon is the writer of the text, because if he is the writer of the text and the way he was dealing with these people, I don't think he was in a position to talk about oppression. But yes.
It's very easy with oppression. It is a national statement in our international statement.
Well, it's a good question you're asking there. In this case, when he's talking about oppression, and I hope I'm answering you right. When he's talking about oppression, I don't think he was just talking about when you oppressing one person. I think it was a group or a nation of people that it's referring to. It's not just referring to one person, although one person could be oppressed. Another person could oppress the next person. But it seems as though he's talking about oppression that was dished out to a group of people or even to a nation. I think that is what he was talking about here.
But Pastor, he said under the sun. So
pardon?
He says under the sun. So
under the sun. When you see under the sun, he's talking about what's going on in the whole, whether it's in the area where it is. Under the sun could be in the whole world too.
Yeah, because the other S at the end, the other one.
Right, but it could be it could be in the whole world. But and I'll come to that later on. It could be. It's a good question. It could be in the whole world. But because of the fact that I believe that this writer, he was confined to a certain area. So I guess he's probably talking about what was happening in his area. But because of the fact that he's saying here oppression, we don't have to confine it to the time that the writer was writing. Oppression could cover any period of time in which oppression is going on. And I would emphasize on that also. So what he's doing here, he's calling out oppression. And this writer of the text, he make it his duty to speak on the behalf of the poor, speak on the behalf of those who don't have a voice. When you're talking about oppression, when you're talking about oppressed, is when a person or government, country, whatever, have people and they put in heavy burden on them, they're pressuring them, it might be bondage, it might be slavery, and these people don't have a voice. So what the writer of the text is doing here, he's speaking on the behalf of these people. And as I mentioned about the people who don't have a voice, you know, back in the day, this is what the writer was doing, speaking on the behalf of those who don't have a voice. And this text that we are looking at is about 2,300 years old. So oppression was happening back there. And this writer was speaking on the behalf of these people. And the question that I will ask today, who is speaking on the behalf of those who are oppressed? Who is speaking today, or who should be speaking today? Who should be the voice of the people today who are oppressed? Who should speak on the behalf of the poor? Who should speak on the behalf of the people who don't have any voice? Who should speak? Who should represent these people?
The church.
The church?
Yeah, the heavenly body has some people that say they don't want to talk about the church, but
well, it should come from the pulpit. It should be the men and women of God, you know, in the congregation, in the churches, that's supposed to represent the people who don't have any voice. Because could you imagine if Johnny Baptist was here today preaching? You think a lot of these oppression that is going on, a lot of these injustices that is taking place in society, you think Johnny Baptist would have turned a blind eye? How about if Yeshua was here preaching? You think he would have turned a blind eye to injustice? How about you go back in the Old Testament, you have men like Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, or Elijah, you know, these fearless men who, you know, the way how they used to address these things. If they were here today, they would have done the same thing. So yes, you are right. The people today who don't have a voice, we as preachers, we're supposed to represent them.
And that's the extent what you're saying.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Because the enemy manipulate the whole thing. Here what the government of the world says, they have to separate church from state. After the church is state. so that they mess it up. The church is state. Because Christ said that he come with his government of your children. So the church is state. So the church it is actually the government of the world copy the kingdom's whole system.
Right.
So they're so smart now they say, let's separate church from state.
Separate it.
After the church is state, the church have to do that. That's the church job.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the people who don't have a voice, the pulpit, the preachers, the so-called men and women of God, they're supposed to represent the people who don't have a voice. The people who can't speak for themselves, they're supposed to represent them. What do you want to say? Go ahead.
I was saying, how could the church, and I said it before, cannot represent the people that are being oppressed, because they are the oppressor in most cases.
Well, you know, yes, I agree with that, because as you said that, back in the time of slavery, when all of these oppression was going on, the European enslavers, the masters, what they used to do, they used to use those ministers in the church, is they were using them as the front man. They were playing the role to get the people to be submissive to the oppression that they were handing out. So I agree with what you're saying. But I'm saying today that we as ministers and we as representative of God, is we are supposed to speak for the people who don't have a voice.
I don't want to cut that, but yes, that is quite true. But as you said many times, people mostly depend on all these international big boys to talk. But right now, as we see what's going on in the United States of America, the kind of oppression that's going on among the minority people, they are the one who in cohesion with what's going on, they're the one who kind of the oppression.
Well, the text is going to explain all of that. But what I'm saying is that, God is going to hold us, especially men and women who are in the pulpit, men and women who take that, responsibility to say they're representing God's people. We are the one who have to represent the people who don't have a voice, the people who can't speak for themselves. But we are doing it. And if, as you were saying, if somebody else take up the responsibility, then you hear we start to criticize them. Look, for instance, we have Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. It seems as though it's a group of young black women who spearheading this organization. And they're taking up the responsibility to speak out on the behalf of black people and people of color who is being oppressed. And what you will hear most preachers will be saying, they bad-mouthing Black Lives Matter. And what they will say is that Black Lives Matter, they are lesbians. You hear them say these women, they are lesbians, and because they are lesbians, we're not supposed to listen to them. Because lesbian is a sinful lifestyle, and they speak in these things. It's truth they're speaking. And even though they're speaking truth, what they're saying is that we're not supposed to listen to them. But what I'm saying, I'm going to say I concern because of the fact that they might be lesbian, yes, because it's a sinful lifestyle. But if the truth is coming from a lesbian, the truth is the truth. You can't really separate the truth. We can't do nothing against the truth, but for the truth. But what I'm trying to say is that these men in Christianity, they will condemn Black Lives Matter because the Black Lives Matter leaders, maybe some of them might be lesbian. I don't know these people's personal sex life. But what they say is that because there is lesbians, they can't really speak for anybody. That is not true. That is not true. They take that responsibility. They see the oppression that the people are under. And they take on that responsibility to speak on the behalf of those people. And these churchmen who say they're called by God, and they're under a mandate to represent God, they don't have any time. They don't have no time to speak on the behalf of those who don't have a voice. Because when you take the responsibility to speak on the behalf of those who don't have a voice, it's going to cost you money. You're going to lose money. And these people don't want to lose any money. Look, for instance, right here in Canada, people who don't have a voice. Look at the people who might be mentally, unstable. If you're mentally unstable, if you lose in your mind, Canada is not a good place to be in. No, I'm telling you. If you lose in your mind, I'm saying to myself this morning, I have to tell my wife that if she noticed that I start losing the mind, I start to become a little bit senile, don't let me stay here. Take me back in St. Vincent or maybe back in Grenada. Because as soon as you start losing your mind here, if something happened that they have to call the police in, the police not coming to take care of you. The police coming to shoot you. Once you notice that over the last couple of years, you notice so much people who mentally, unstable, and they having little mental problems, and the family calling for a wellness check. They call it a wellness check. And when the police come in to give a wellness check, instead the police try to take care of these people. Yes, I know sometimes they might have a weapon. Look at the last one I can remember is a guy up in Brampton. This brother, he was in his own house and he have a knife in his hand, and somebody probably called for a wellness check on this guy's behalf because he have a knife in his hand. The police come, the guy in his house, in his own house. He's not in somebody's house. He's not on the street. He's in his house, and he have a knife in his hand. But they know he have some mental issues. Instead, the police come and try to talk to him and try to wait him out. He's not hurting anybody. The police shoot him and kill him. They shoot him and kill him. So that's what I'm saying. These are things that people who don't have control of their minds, and people who suffer in these oppression and injustice, is we supposed to talk, on the behalf of these people. But, we don't want to do that. Look at, it was a few years ago, we have this guy, Defante Miller, out in Whitby, I think. He was on the street, maybe he was going home, I guess it was late at night. The police it was two brothers. One was a Toronto police, but he was off duty. and he just pull the guy over, start running him, because and this guy's a youth in his early late teens, I think, chasing the guy down, the guy running, and the two brothers caught up with him. One is a police officer, and the guy they take out a piece of steel, piece of pipe, and they start to beat this young black guy, beat him, and they run him through the village. And was in front of this guy's house. I think this guy has some kind of, job that he's recognized. I don't know if he was a police officer, fireman, or whatever he was. But it was in front of his house that all of this was going on. And this guy picked up the phone and called 911 and said that he see two men beating another guy, and he wanted them to come to help. They came in to help. Police came in, and they come in and they discovered that one of these guys who was beating up this other guy was a police officer, off-duty police officer. What they did, they beat this guy senseless with a piece of pipe. Yeah, he lost an eye. And what they did, because they discovered that this guy's an off-duty police officer, they gave him the handcuff to handcuff this guy that he already, almost beaten to death. And they never filed no set of report. They didn't file a report. And when the guy parents, I guess, maybe get a lawyer, the lawyer started to dig into it, then they decide to file a report, and then they found out that the reason why they wasn't filing any report, the off-duty police officer, his father was a big boy in the Toronto police force. So they decided they're going to just sweep everything under the rug. And, they have a big court case, but they didn't put him in jail. Because they don't find him guilty. They don't find him guilty of any wrong. And this guy, he's walking about right now and he have a glass eye. So that what we're saying is that people who have a voice, is the church that's supposed to speak for them, but we're not doing that. So what he says is that, again, I look and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. So it's like what I was saying, we don't have to confine it just to the area that these things actually happen, because I guess the writer of the text, probably he was back in Palestine area, when that was going on. But anyway, oppression taking place, we can use this text to cover what was happening here. And he was saying it happening under the sun. So this don't have to be confined to any period. And when I look at this period, when I look at this, when he's talking about oppression, I see in it the oppression that happened to our ancestors. Yeah. This text, another person who interpreting this text could use it for something else. But I see playing out in this text here what happened to black people during the time of slavery, the kind of oppression that they were under. And, what he said here, I saw the tears of the oppressed. The tears of the oppressed. You think when somebody is oppressed, they're in tears. You're crying. Sometimes you don't even have tears. Sometimes you're crying and like nothing, no tears coming. And you're talking about the oppressed. He saw the tears. This writer, he had feelings for the people who was oppressed. I saw the tears of those who was oppressed, and they have no comforter. They're oppressed and they're crying, and there's nobody to comfort them. When you think about those people, could you remember that, our ancestors back in Africa? Could you imagine when those slave catchers go out in the village and catch young men and young women? And these young men and young women don't get to return back to their family. Could you imagine the amount of tears that these people used to cry, because of their loved ones gone missing? But people don't see that as, they don't see them as people because they're not supposed to have any feelings, right? Not supposed to feel. So the oppressed, they're shedding tears. And they don't have nobody to comfort them. There's nobody there to relieve them. They don't have a shoulder to lean on. And as I said, you can apply it to any age, any time. And, you know, it says, I said, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. They have no comforter. Paul was on the side of those who are oppressed. So power was on the side. What he's saying here, the power or the authority was on the side of the people who was oppressing. The power was not on the side of the weak, you know. No. The one who don't have any voice, the power was not on their side. And then I look at, you know, as I said, I'm going to confine this, I'm going to just look at the oppression that, you know, black people was under during the time of slavery. And as I said here, that the power was on the side of the oppressed. Do you know that during the time of slavery, if the slave master beating a slave, let's suppose the slave do something wrong, whatever, he didn't produce enough work, or maybe he didn't get up early enough, and the master decided to beat him. And the master beating him, and he's on the verge of killing him. And he's a big strong guy like me, or Brother Lewis, or Brother Telesor, one of those big strong guys. And the master beating you to death, and you put your hand up to defend yourself. You know the law rule against that? It was against the law. You couldn't defend yourself. If you beating the slave to death, you couldn't defend yourself. If the master come into your house in the night and he want your 12-year-old daughter, your 14-year-old daughter, or maybe you want your wife to be with him for that night, or you want your son, because some of them was homosexual too. You want your little son to go with him for the night, you can't resist him, because the law was on their side. So what the text is saying here is that the law is on the side of those that are oppressing. Power, they have power. Power was on their side. And that's really why some people are saying that when they look at racism and discrimination, they will say that there's a difference between racism and discrimination. And it is true, you know. A lot of people don't take time to look at these things, but if you have common sense, you could see that there's a difference between racism and discrimination. A lot of people think that racism is when a white person say, well, I don't like black people. That is not really racism. It's the face. It's the face of racism. It's hatred, yes. And that is really discrimination. They make a decision that they hate black people. If a black man say, well, I don't like white people, that is not really racism. That is what you call discrimination. You discriminate. But when you talk about racism, racism is a system of power. It's a system of power. It's somebody who has the power to make decision. Is when somebody can make the decision that you can't go to that school, or your children can't go to that school, or somebody sit in their office and they make a decision and say, you can't get a loan in that bank. Could you imagine you have money in your account and you want a loan to buy a house, and you go into the bank but they say, no, you're not qualified. You can't get a loan in that bank. Or somebody say that you're not qualified. You're not qualified to get a job here. You can't get a job here. I remember years ago, 25 years ago, when I started working in the city, driving the garbage truck, going down the road, man, enjoying myself, listening to the gospel music. So I pull onto the street, you know, picking up my stuff. And I see this black woman come out, and she said, big God, I want black man to drive a city truck. He said, never in my life do you ever see a black man driving city truck. And it's true, because they never used to give black people and people of color jobs to work in government places, like, you know, city and municipalities and, you know, government jobs. People like me so never used to get these kind of jobs. It's only about maybe 30, you know, years ago they start doing that, start hiring people like that. So when we talk about racism, it's not when some white man say that he hate a black person. No, that is not, that's the face. That's the face. Racism is when you can use power to stop somebody from getting a job. Use power to stop somebody from living in a community. You want to buy a house in a community and they say, no, you can't go here. You don't belong. You can't live in this community. They use their power to block you. Use their power to stop you from going to school. Use their power to prevent you from getting a job and stuff like that. I remember years ago when I was living in Trinidad. I lived St. Vincent when I was young. When I was in my late teens and went to Trinidad. When I lived St. Vincent, working on the estate in St. Vincent, a laborer working on the estate. I don't know if Brother Telesford, you might remember that. Working on the estate, it was $190 a day for a laborer. Laborer working in the field used to get $190 a day. And I remember I leave St. Vincent that period of time. I don't know if it was 76 or somewhere around there. But I leave and I went to Trinidad and accustomed getting that little change. If you work with somebody, you get a little $190 a day. And then I go to Trinidad and I got a job working as a carpenter. And it was $4.25 an hour. $4.25 an hour. I work and I was able to build a house and I got married and stuff like that, And I'm planning, man, I got big plans. And I was working on a high-rise building in Port of Spain. And if you guys know anything about Trinidad, Benson Street Police Station, there's a high-rise building, a 14-story building there. I work on that building from the foundation up to the top. So when we reached almost to the completion, the company I was working with, they got another job to build the Hall of Justice. Hall of Justice is just opposite Woodford Square. And they took a group of us and they sent us there to work in the foundation to start this building. So I remember one Saturday we were there, and the white man from England, he came, and Saturday time they used to give us piecework. Give you a certain amount of work and you finish and go. So he came and he gave my foreman the job to do. So the foreman come to me, he said, Downs, he used to call me Downs, in front of the white guy. I know why he did that. In front of the white guy, come and say, Downs, you think you could finish it? Because, you don't want to take a job and then you have to be there all day Saturday, try to finish it. So he said, Downs, you think we could finish it? I said, well, it's a lot, but I think we could try. As soon as I said that, I don't know what was so wrong about that. The white man fired me? Yes. No, you don't want me to use, he fired me instantly. And that was a job in which we have union. It was a unionized job. I remember the union, we go to the head of that company maybe 4 different times, trying to negotiate to get my job back. I didn't say nothing else. All I say, I think, it's a lot, but we could try. We go about 4 times trying to get the job back. And they said to the union, we don't want that guy back on the job. And this is in a black country where a black man at the time was prime minister. I think it was Eric Willem at the time was the prime minister. And white people had so much power in Trinidad at that time that I'm a black person, a Caribbean man, and I don't do anything wrong. I don't say nothing wrong just because I say that, we could try. He fired me from that job. And I tell him, I really felt it, because the Hall of Justice probably took about maybe 8 years to finish. That was an 8 years job. And I can remember working on that job in the foundation. I had all kind of plans, what I was going to do with this money, buy a piece of land and stuff like that. And the guy, he got me off of the job, and there was nothing that the union could have done to get me back there. So when you look at the text here, and the text is saying that power is on the side of the oppressor, it's true. I'm telling you, white people is very powerful. They are very powerful. And just like how we're not supposed to underestimate the power of the devil, it's the same thing, we can't underestimate their power. And what the text is saying here, it is so true. It said that, and they have no comforter, and I declare that, yes, I saw the tears of the oppressor, and they have no comforter, and power was on the side of those, of their oppressor. So the people who have the power was the people who was oppressing. The oppressed didn't have anybody to talk on their behalf. And he said, and they have no comforter. And I declare that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. So because of that condition, because you're so oppressed, you don't have nobody to speak up on your behalf. People are saying, man, I'm better, if I die. I'm better off if I'm dead than being alive, because of the pressure that these people was under. And applying it again to our ancestors coming over from Africa here. You know how much of our people who experience this? They rather to die than to live. They throw themselves overboard. You know how much of them commit suicide? How much of them waiting, in Africa by the port where they're transporting these people, take their own life. And some time ago I was watching this documentary. I can't remember the African country, the Gold Coast. Which one is the Gold Coast? The country that they call the Gold Coast. It will come to me later on. Anyway, the Gold Coast have this place, the port, where they used to transport all of these slaves from, and they call it the door of no return. And at the door of no return is a big door, and when you open the door, you're going straight onto the seashore where the ship dock and waiting to take these people. And once you open that door and go through that door, you're not coming back. But the thing, what was so amazing, on top of that building, where they were keeping all of these slaves, where they rape all of these women, where all of the, people used to die because they're waiting for transportation to go on the ship. All of this, chaos was taking place. Right on top of that building, there was a church. It was a church, the British had a church right on top where they were praising God. These guys were praising God, and when they're done, they were going to rape these women. They were going to ill-treat these slaves, and they're doing all of this wickedness, and that was going on. So it shows what the guy is saying here about the oppressed didn't have anybody to comfort them. They rather to be dead than to be alive. And it says in verse 3, but better than both is he who has not yet been, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. So he's saying here, the person that is better is the person who never get the opportunity to be born. He said that he is even better than the one who born and experienced these things. The person who never get the opportunity to be born is in a better state. And when I see this in the text, it made me ask the question, before we were born, were we existing some other place? Were we existing? Is there anybody have any scripture that probably might point to the existence of us before we become what we call humans today? Was there a time when we were in existence before? According to what Jeremiah chapter 1, God said that even before Jeremiah was created, God said he knew him. And some people are saying that maybe there is some kind of an existence of humanity or humans even before they come into the form that we are in. I guess that is really heavy stuff, eh? and the Lord said to Jeremiah, even before he was created, he knew him. So the writer is saying here that these people, it is better that they were never been born because they were suffering so much. Suffering, they was under such heavy oppression that, they chose to die than to live. And it was even better for them. The person who never had the opportunity to experience life was in a better state than them. And it tells us in verse 4, and I saw that all labor and all achievement sprung from man's envy of his neighbor. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So what he's saying here, he looked and he saw the man who is laboring, and he saw the man who have the desire to achieve things. He wants to accumulate. And what he's saying, all of this desire to accumulate and to achieve things, he only have that desire because of envy. And it's because of the fact that he wants to achieve more than his neighbor. He wants to keep up with the Joneses. He wants to get a bigger house than his neighbor. And when you look at what's going on in society today, right here in Canada, we are seeing this playing out. You know, we are seeing the greed on the part of the government, and the greed on the part of people who live in this society. People are so greedy here in Canada that most people can't even own a house. Could you imagine you working and you have a job and you can't own a house because of the fact that people are so greedy and the government is so greedy? And when you look at it, anybody with common sense will tell you, if the government didn't more or less legalize and make buying a house a business, buying and selling house here is a business in Canada. And that is what really caused so many people. It locked a lot of people out from getting the opportunity to buy a house. You know, because some of these companies, some of these people, rich people who live in outside of Canada, for instance, people in China, people in places like Hong Kong, India, well, whatever, people that have money, they will have contact here and they will know a subdivision going up. And sometimes they might decide to buy out the whole subdivision. And then when that subdivision complete, they start flipping these houses. Or a big, apartment complex with condominiums and stuff like that. One company might just buy that out. And they're not living here, no. These people, some of them never even come here. And they start flipping that. Or maybe it have people in all different communities. They have a house already, but what they will do, they'll buy another one and they'll flip. And you see, because the government is not against that. You know why? The reason why the government is not against that, every time you buy a house and you flip that house, the government have to get the sales tax. And let's suppose a house probably costs maybe $700,000, maybe, well, say $700,000. The sales tax from that could be maybe $30,000, $40,000. And you buy that house and you flip it. You have to pay $40,000 to the government. Then somebody buy that house from you again and flip it. They have to pay another $40,000 to the government. So the government is not against that. So you see, all these things run on greed. And the average man and woman, even though they have a job, they can't buy a house because when these people keep flipping these houses and these companies outside of Canada keep buying these subdivision and flipping them, is the more the price of house keep going up. So the average man and woman who working, they can't afford to buy a house. And is the government don't really care about the people here? I sound like a politician, eh? No. And it's the same thing. Listen, it's the same thing where vehicles are concerned. Every time somebody buy a new vehicle, they have to pay the sales tax on it. Let's suppose you buy a vehicle for $40,000. You might have to pay maybe $2,000-$3,000 on that vehicle for taxes. And you keep that vehicle for 2 years and it depreciate a bit. On that same vehicle, when you sell that vehicle, the person that bought that vehicle from you, they might have to pay maybe $2,000 to the government sales tax on that same vehicle. Then if that person who buy that vehicle from you decide to keep that vehicle for 6 months and they're selling it again, depends on the value on that vehicle, they have to pay another maybe $1,500 to the government for sales tax. So that's the reason why the government don't really care about what people doing when they start flipping houses and selling houses, because they making money off of it. And that's the reason why we shouldn't allow men like Justin Trudeau and these guys fool us. Because they in power for so long and this thing going on, and I was a little nobody down here and I could see where the problem is, but they don't want to see it. They don't want to see it. All right.
But Pastor,
yes.
You mustn't forget too.
Like countries like America and Canada, they are all corporate countries. Yeah, they're corporate countries. So even though we have never prime minister or president, they're still not the boss. Because they're corporate countries, so they have somebody over them.
Well, is the people who in charge of the Bank of Canada, or the Federal Reserve, is these people are really calling the shot. Is people like, for instance, those Caribbean countries, they're not really running things. Is the World Bank. Because when they had to go and borrow money from the World Bank had to tell them how to run the country, what they could do, how much taxes they need to implement, what kind of rules they need to put into operation because of the fact that they owe the World Bank their money. So what you're saying is right. But you see, it's hard for the ordinary man and woman to really get ahead here. In this country because of the kind of rules that they have here and the kind of a slackness that the government allowing to go on. I believe that every working person in this country should have their own house. That's how I see it. How come in St. Vincent, Grenada, it doesn't matter what kind of house they have. I don't care how much wind you might say blowing in that house, or how much holes you might say the house might have. Or maybe you don't have galvanized, you have grass on the top. Every person have a place where they could call their home. So why the same thing can't happen here in Canada?
And they got more land.
Yes, they have so much land here, and most people back in the islands, they don't have a steady job.
No.
People here have steady job and they're working. Some people have steady job and they could hardly pay their rent. When they pay the rent, it hardly have money for them to buy gas or to buy bus ticket. Yeah. And you talk about you're living in a country, one of the richest country in the world. Yeah. That's the reason why I'm telling you. Sometimes when they have this election going on, I don't have the appetite to go and vote for some of these guys. For instance, Justin Trudeau is there for 6 years. 6 years he's there, and he just realized that people in Canada need houses. Could you imagine that? He's there for 6 years, and he just discovered that people need houses. And, he have a plan for young people especially to get houses. And, I hope that the people in Canada is going to hold him to that. And that's the reason why I say I support the NDP. I support the NDP because the NDP is the only government that I think is going to hold these guys when they make these promises. The NDP is the only party I think that would hold them to the promise that they make.
So, Pastor, don't you realize that Justin Trudeau's father is the one to make us here?
Yeah. You see that statement? You see that statement, brother? Listen, yes, okay, but as you said that, okay, listen. The reason why we here and Trudeau allow us to come is because in Europe at the time there was such heavy development that was going on in Europe that they couldn't get more Europeans. They couldn't get more Europeans. So what they did, they had to turn to places like the Caribbean. It's the same thing in England. When after the war, the Second World War, and everybody looking for people to build back their place because places in England was almost destroyed, by the Germans, and they're looking for people to build back Britain, build back, the Great Britain. But what thing they do? They send down to Jamaica, send down a big ship down in Jamaica. Bring up these black Jamaicans up in England. When they reach up there, nobody not renting them place. They can't get place to live in. Some of them walk in the street for weeks and months, and nobody not renting them because they're black. They don't want them to live in. So Trudeau allowed people from the Caribbean to come here. But the reason why they allow them to come is not because they want them. It's because they couldn't get people from Europe. There was a boom in Europe, so they decided to turn to the Caribbean. And look what they did. They took all of the brain. They drained the Caribbean. I remember when I was in school, every time we have a good teacher in school, or a good nurse, somebody with a little bit of education that could teach the people. You hear that? You gone to Canada? Yes, they gone to England. And you know, when they come to Canada, they can't get a job in. They're not going to get a job in the field that they were qualified in.
That's right.
They had to go and work in some kind of paper mill. I remember there was a vice principal from my village. He came here, and I thought, you know, when he come, he's going to get some kind of highfalutin job. When he come, the guy had to go and work in a paper mill.
Yeah.
And he was a vice principal.
Yeah.
So they just drain. It's a brain drain. It's the same thing that's going on with the people from Afghanistan, you know. Mm-hmm. All these 40,000 people here, Trudeau say they're going to take in or whatever. They're draining. I know, you know, the government of Afghanistan, I don't really support them. But when they take out all these people, what is going to happen to the rest of the people that are left behind? Yeah. It's a brain drain. You think it's uneducated people they're taking out? No. You think it's the criminals? No. You think it's the people in prison? No. They're taking out? It's the best of the best. Yeah. They're taking out. So, you know, yes, we're happy that we're here, but they don't really, Trudeau didn't bring us here because of the fact that he so loved Caribbean people. No, it's because he couldn't get nobody else. He couldn't get nobody else. And look at even right now, look at how they limit the amount of people that coming in from the Caribbean. Look at what they did. If you're from the Caribbean, you have to have a visa. And you have to go online, you have to be qualified online. You can't even see a person, you know, to talk to them about it. You have to fill out some kind of form online to get, you know, some kind of a visa application. And I think even people, before, when I came here, I think you was able to sponsor mother and father. I don't even think you could do that now. Can you do that? Well, but, you know, so they're not really doing us any favor. Is using really using us?
That's right.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Enough of that. Okay. All right. We'll bring our time to a close today. Okay. All right. Remember to vote for Pastor Duncan the next time. Lord, bless us with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Lord, even as we are living in this time in which so many of your people is being oppressed. God, there's so many people who have tears in their eyes, in their heart, and God, and as you said, the power is on the side of the oppressor. I pray, oh God, that you grant your people grace and strength, Lord, so that we can endure. Fill our hearts, oh God, with joy unspeakable and full of glory, even as we experience this time that we are living in. We ask these favors in the blessed anointed name of your Son, Yeshua. Amen. Amen. Praise the Lord.